When tech billionaire Alexander Hayes collapsed during what was supposed to be the most important business dinner of his career, nobody expected the minimum wage waitress to be the one who would save not just his life, but his entire billion-dollar empire. What happened next would change both their lives forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Crystal Pavilion restaurant gleamed like a jewel against the Manhattan skyline, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of the city that never sleeps. This wasn't just any restaurant. It was where titans of industry sealed deals worth hundreds of millions, where senators dined with CEOs, and where a single handshake could shift the balance of global markets. Alexander Hayes adjusted his platinum Patek Philippe watch as he stepped out of his midnight black Bentley Mulsanne. At 34, he commanded Hayes Digital Solutions, a tech empire that had revolutionized cloud computing for Fortune 500 companies. His net worth had crossed the $3 billion mark just last month, making him one of the youngest self-made billionaires in Silicon Valley history. Tonight was crucial. The Japanese conglomerate Nakamura Industries was considering a partnership that would expand his company into the Asian market, a deal worth $2.8 billion over 5 years. His board of directors, his investors, even his own father, who had doubted him since day one, were all watching to see if Alexander could close the biggest deal of his career. The restaurant's interior whispered luxury from every corner. Imported Italian marble floors reflected the warm glow of crystal chandeliers, while soft jazz music created an atmosphere of refined elegance. The maître d', a distinguished man in his 60s, recognized Alexander immediately. "Mr. Hayes, your private dining room is ready. The Nakamura executives arrived 15 minutes ago." Alexander nodded, his mind already racing through the presentation he had memorized. Every statistic, every projection, every counter-argument he had prepared for months. This wasn't just about money. It was about proving that his vision could transcend borders, that the small-town kid from Ohio who had built his first computer at age 12 could compete on the world stage. As he was escorted through the main dining area, his attention was caught by a young woman weaving gracefully between tables, balancing multiple plates with the skill of someone who had been doing this for years. Her uniform was simple: a crisp white blouse, black slacks, and a burgundy apron bearing the restaurant's emblem. But there was something about her posture, her focused determination, that made her stand out among the staff. Isabella Rodriguez had been working double shifts for 3 weeks straight. At 26, she juggled 2 jobs: days at the Crystal Pavilion and evenings at a small diner in Queens, all while taking online business classes at night. Her dream was to open her own restaurant someday, but right now she needed every dollar to support her younger brother Miguel's medical school tuition and help her mother with the rent on their small apartment in Astoria. She had learned to navigate the world of wealthy patrons with grace and invisibility. Smile, serve, stay professional, collect tips, go home. The rich lived in a different universe, one where a single bottle of wine cost more than she made in a week. She didn't resent them. Everyone had their path, but she certainly didn't expect to understand their world, nor did she expect them to notice hers. Tonight felt different somehow. The restaurant was buzzing with an energy she couldn't quite place. Mr. Hendricks, the general manager, had been unusually tense all day, personally inspecting every table setting in the private dining rooms. She had overheard snippets of conversation about an important business deal, something involving international partnerships and billions of dollars. Alexander reached the private dining room where 3 impeccably dressed Japanese executives sat waiting. Hiroshi Nakamura, the CEO, was a man in his late 50s with sharp eyes and an expression that revealed nothing. His son, Kenji, served as the company's international development director, while their chief financial officer, Mrs. Tanaka, had a reputation for asking questions that could make seasoned executives sweat. "Mr. Hayes," Hiroshi Nakamura rose, offering a respectful bow, "thank you for hosting us this evening." "The pleasure is entirely mine," Alexander replied, his confidence masking the slight tremor in his hands. He had been so focused on preparing for this meeting that he had skipped lunch, and now he was beginning to feel the familiar warning signs his body gave him when his blood sugar dropped too low. He pushed the feeling aside. This meeting was too important to let anything derail it. The conversation began with pleasantries, discussion of the flight from Tokyo, comments about the restaurant's reputation, observations about New York's unpredictable weather. Alexander participated smoothly, but internally, he was calculating timing. They would order appetizers. He would present his proposal during the main course and hopefully secure preliminary agreement by dessert. Isabella appeared at their table with menus and water glasses, moving with practiced efficiency. She had served in this private dining room before and knew the protocol. Be present but invisible, anticipate needs without being intrusive, ensure every detail was perfect. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said with a warm smile. "My name is Isabella, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with something from our wine selection?" Alexander barely glanced at her, his attention focused on his guests. "Please, choose whatever you prefer," he told the Nakamura executives. "Tonight is about celebrating what I hope will be a long and prosperous partnership." As Isabella took their drink orders, she noticed something odd about the young billionaire. Despite his confident demeanor, there was a slight pallor to his skin, and his hands seemed to tremble almost imperceptibly when he reached for his water glass. Having grown up with a diabetic uncle, she recognized the subtle signs, but she dismissed the thought. Rich people had expensive doctors and personal trainers. Surely someone like Alexander Hayes had his health perfectly managed. The business discussion began in earnest as the appetizers arrived. Alexander launched into his presentation with the passion that had built his empire from nothing. He spoke about cloud infrastructure, data security, and the untapped potential of the Asian market. His vision was compelling, his numbers solid, his strategy brilliant. But something was wrong. The familiar symptoms were becoming harder to ignore. His vision began to blur slightly at the edges, and a cold sweat started forming despite the restaurant's comfortable temperature. His hands felt shaky, and there was a growing sense of anxiety that had nothing to do with the business deal. He had been managing type 1 diabetes since college, usually with meticulous care. His insulin pump was discreet, his glucose monitor was cutting-edge technology, and he maintained a strict schedule of meals and monitoring. But the stress of recent weeks, the irregular eating patterns, and tonight's skip lunch were creating a dangerous combination. Alexander tried to continue his presentation, but his words began to sound slightly slurred to his own ears. The Nakamura executives exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from interested to concerned. "Mr. Hayes," Kenji Nakamura said gently, "are you feeling well?" "I'm fine," Alexander insisted, though he definitely wasn't. The room seemed to be tilting slightly, and his heart was racing. "As I was saying, our projected growth in the Tokyo market." His sentence trailed off as the glucose meter on his phone, connected to his continuous monitor, began vibrating with urgent alerts. The reading was dangerously low and dropping fast. Isabella, refilling water glasses at a nearby service station, noticed the change in the room's atmosphere. The billionaire's confident voice had become uncertain, and she could see from across the room that his complexion had gone from pale to an alarming grayish color. Alexander gripped the edge of the table, trying to maintain his composure, but his body was shutting down. Severe hypoglycemia was taking hold, and he had perhaps minutes before he would lose consciousness entirely. "Excuse me," he managed to say, attempting to stand. "I just need a moment." But as he rose from his chair, his legs gave out completely. Alexander Hayes, master of billion-dollar deals and technological innovation, collapsed to the floor of the Crystal Pavilion's most exclusive dining room, his body convulsing as his blood sugar plummeted to life-threatening levels. The Nakamura executives stood in shocked silence, unsure what to do. Other diners began to notice the commotion. The maitre d' rushed toward the room, already reaching for his phone to call 911. But Isabella was already moving, her server's tray forgotten as she sprinted across the dining room. She had seen this exact scenario play out with her uncle 5 years ago, and she knew that every second counted. Isabella dropped to her knees beside Alexander's convulsing form, her mind instantly shifting into emergency mode. The expensive suits and intimidating atmosphere meant nothing now. This was a medical crisis, and she had the knowledge to help. "Sir, can you hear me?" she called out, checking his pulse while scanning his body for any medical devices. Her fingers found the small insulin pump attached to his belt, confirming her suspicions. "Does anyone know if he's diabetic?" The Nakamura executive stood frozen, unsure how to respond. Hiroshi Nakamura stepped forward hesitantly. "We only met him today. This is our first business meeting." Isabella's training kicked in, not from any formal medical education, but from years of caring for her uncle Carlos, who had suffered 3 severe hypoglycemic episodes before learning to manage his condition properly. She knew the signs, the timeline, and most importantly, what needed to happen right now. "I need sugar fast," she announced to the room. "Glucose tablets, orange juice, anything with concentrated sugar." She looked up at the maitre d', who was still fumbling with his phone. "Call 911, but also get me honey packets from the kitchen, at least 6 of them." Alexander's convulsions were beginning to subside, but his breathing was shallow and his skin had taken on a dangerous blue tint around his lips. Isabella gently turned him onto his side, ensuring his airway remained clear, while checking his smartphone. The glucose monitoring app showed a reading of 38 milligrams per deciliter, critically low. "What are you doing?" demanded Mr. Hendricks, the general manager, who had rushed into the room. "You shouldn't touch him." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "It will take at least 8 minutes to get here." Isabella cut him off firmly. "He doesn't have 8 minutes. His blood sugar is in the danger zone." She had learned from Uncle Carlos's close calls that severe hypoglycemia could cause brain damage or death if not treated immediately. The first rule was to raise blood sugar quickly but safely. A server appeared with honey packets and a glass of orange juice. Isabella tore open 2 honey packets and carefully placed small amounts on Alexander's tongue, tilting his head to prevent choking. His swallowing reflex was weak but present, a good sign. "Is there any glucagon in his bag or pockets?" she asked the room. "It would be in an emergency injection kit, probably red or orange." Kenji Nakamura, who had been searching through Alexander's briefcase, held up a small red case. "This? Perfect." Isabella's hands remained steady as she opened the emergency glucagon kit. She had administered this injection to her uncle twice, and knew the procedure by heart. After cleaning the injection site with an alcohol wipe from the kit, she delivered the dose into Alexander's thigh muscle through his pants. The room watched in tense silence as Isabella continued her careful monitoring. She elevated his legs slightly, using folded napkins, checked his pulse regularly, and continued applying small amounts of honey to his mouth every 30 seconds. "What's your relationship to Mr. Hayes?" Mrs. Tanaka asked quietly, clearly impressed by Isabella's competence. "I've never met him before tonight," Isabella replied, not taking her eyes off Alexander's face. "I'm just a waitress who knows something about diabetes." This revelation sent murmurs through the gathered crowd. The Japanese executives exchanged meaningful glances, while other restaurant patrons who had gathered in the doorway whispered among themselves. Here was a minimum wage worker potentially saving the life of a billionaire, using knowledge most people didn't possess. After what felt like an eternity but was actually only 4 minutes, Alexander's eyelids began to flutter, his breathing deepened, and some color returned to his cheeks. The glucagon was working. "Mr. Hayes," Isabella said softly, "can you hear me? You're safe. You had a hypoglycemic episode, but you're going to be okay." Quote. Alexander's eyes opened slowly, confusion clouding his features as he tried to process his surroundings. He was lying on the floor of his most important business meeting, surrounded by concerned faces, with a young woman in a server's uniform kneeling beside him. "What happened?" he managed to whisper. "Your blood sugar dropped dangerously low," Isabella explained gently. "I gave you glucagon and some honey. The paramedics are on their way, but you're stable now." Alexander tried to sit up, but Isabella placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Stay lying down for a few more minutes. Let your body recover." The sound of sirens grew louder outside. Within moments, paramedics rushed into the dining room with their equipment. Isabella quickly briefed them on Alexander's condition, the treatment she had administered, and the timeline of events. "Glucose reading was 38 when I checked his phone app," she reported professionally. "I administered 1 full glucagon injection at approximately 8:47 p.m., along with honey for sublingual absorption. He regained consciousness about 3 minutes ago." The lead paramedic, a woman in her 40s, looked at Isabella with surprise and respect. "Are you medical personnel?" "No, just someone who's dealt with this before." As the paramedics took over Alexander's care, checking his vital signs and preparing to transport him to the hospital, Isabella stepped back to give them space. She became acutely aware that the entire restaurant was staring at her wealthy patrons, her fellow servers, management, and most notably, the Japanese executives who had come here for a multi-billion-dollar business deal. "Miss," Hiroshi Nakamura approached her with a deep bow, "I believe you saved this man's life." Isabella felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Mrs. Tanaka interjected firmly. "Most people would have panicked or waited for professional help. Your quick thinking and knowledge prevented what could have been a tragedy." Alexander, now sitting up on a gurney and looking much more alert, caught Isabella's eye. "I need to thank you properly," he said, his voice still weak but sincere. "What's your name?" "Isabella Rodriguez. And you don't need to thank me. I'm just glad you're okay." "Isabella," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. "I won't forget this." The paramedics prepared to wheel him out to the ambulance. Alexander looked desperately at the Nakamura executives, realizing that his crucial business deal was falling apart before his eyes. "Mr. Nakamura, I know this isn't how tonight was supposed to go." Hiroshi Nakamura held up a hand to stop him. "Mr. Hayes, your health is the priority now. We can discuss business later." As Alexander was wheeled away, still protesting that he felt fine and could continue the meeting, the restaurant slowly returned to its normal rhythm. But the impact of what had just happened lingered in the air. Isabella found herself surrounded by her co-workers, all asking questions about how she knew what to do. Mr. Hendricks pulled her aside, his expression unreadable. "That was remarkable," he said slowly. "How did you know how to handle that situation?" Isabella shrugged, suddenly feeling drained. "My uncle has diabetes. I've seen this happen before." "Well, you potentially saved that man's life, and quite possibly saved this restaurant from a lawsuit." As Isabella returned to clearing tables and finishing her shift, she couldn't shake the image of Alexander's grateful eyes or the way the powerful Japanese executives had looked at her with genuine respect. She had spent years feeling invisible in this world of wealth and influence, but tonight, for just a few minutes, she had been the most important person in the room. She had no idea that those few minutes would change everything. 3 days had passed since the incident at Crystal Pavilion, and Alexander Hayes found himself in an unprecedented situation. For the first time in his career, he couldn't focus on business. Every attempt to review quarterly reports or analyze market trends was interrupted by thoughts of a waitress named Isabella Rodriguez. The doctors had confirmed what she already knew. Without her immediate intervention, he would have suffered irreversible brain damage or worse. But beyond saving his life, something else was happening. The Nakamura executives had postponed their return to Tokyo, requesting another meeting. Their reasoning had shocked everyone, including Alexander's own board of directors. "We want to meet with the young woman who helped you," Hiroshi Nakamura had told him during a phone call from his hospital bed. "Her actions revealed something about American character and values that impressed us greatly." Now, Alexander sat in his penthouse office overlooking Central Park, waiting for Isabella to arrive. He had spent considerable effort tracking her down through the restaurant, only to discover she had picked up extra shifts at 3 different establishments to cover her brother's medical school expenses. When he finally reached her, she had been reluctant to meet, insisting she didn't need any reward. Isabella entered his office building feeling completely out of place. The marble lobby, with its soaring ceilings and abstract art installations, was more luxurious than any space she had ever entered. Security guards in expensive suits guided her to a private elevator that whisked her up 47 floors without stopping. "Miss Rodriguez," Alexander stood as she entered his office, and Isabella was struck by how different he looked in his natural environment. Gone was the vulnerable man from the restaurant floor. This was clearly a person accustomed to commanding rooms full of powerful people. Yet his smile seemed genuine, even nervous. "Please, call me Isabella, and you really didn't need to go through all this trouble." "Actually, I did." Alexander gestured to a seating area away from his imposing desk. "Can I offer you something to drink? Coffee? Tea? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you." Isabella perched on the edge of an Italian leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Look, Mr. Hayes, I don't need any money or reward for what happened. Anyone would have done the same thing." Alexander shook his head. "That's where you're wrong. I've since learned that 3 other people in that restaurant that night had medical training, a retired nurse, a former EMT, and someone who worked at a hospital. None of them moved to help until after you had already taken action." Isabella shifted uncomfortably. "I just happen to know about diabetes from personal experience." "It was more than knowledge," Alexander insisted. "It was courage, quick thinking, and compassion. And apparently, it made quite an impression on the Nakamura executives." He pulled out his phone and showed her an email. "They want to meet with you before finalizing our business agreement." Hiroshi Nakamura said your actions demonstrated the kind of character and values they want to associate with in their American partnerships. Isabella stared at the screen, not fully comprehending. "I don't understand. What does this have to do with your business deal?" Alexander leaned forward, his expression becoming more animated. "Everything. They were impressed by more than just your medical knowledge. They saw someone who acted without hesitation to help a stranger, someone who refused to be intimidated by wealth or status, someone who possessed grace under pressure. They want to meet the person who represents what they consider the best of American values. But I'm nobody special. I'm just a waitress trying to get through college." "You're exactly who they want to meet." Alexander paused, studying her face. "Isabella, that business deal is worth $2.8 billion. It would establish my company as a major player in the Asian market and create thousands of jobs. The Nakamura family has built their empire on the principle of character-based partnerships. Your actions that night convinced them that Americans still possess the integrity they're looking for." The weight of this revelation settled over Isabella. "So you're saying that by helping you, I somehow helped save your business deal?" "More than that, you made it possible." Alexander stood and walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows. "But there's something else I need to tell you. Something more important than any business deal." Isabella waited, sensing a shift in his demeanor. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you," he said quietly, still facing the window. "Not just because you saved my life, but because of who you are. In a room full of people who were supposed to be the most important individuals in my world, you were the only one who knew exactly what to do. You were the only one who acted." He turned back to face her. "I've spent my entire adult life surrounded by people who want something from me. Investors wanting returns, employees wanting promotions, dates wanting access to my lifestyle. But you asked for nothing. You expected nothing. You just helped because it was the right thing to do." Isabella felt her heart racing. "Mr. Hayes." "Alexander, please." He moved closer, his voice becoming more earnest. "I know we come from different worlds. I know this seems impossible. But I'd like to get to know you better. Not because I owe you my life, but because I think you might be the most remarkable person I've ever met." Before Isabella could respond, Alexander's assistant knocked and entered. "Sir, the Nakamura executives have arrived for the 3 o'clock meeting." Isabella's eyes widened. "They're here now?" Alexander nodded. "I hope you don't mind. They insisted on meeting you before finalizing anything." Quote, "The next hour was unlike anything Isabella had ever experienced. She found herself in a boardroom with some of the most powerful business leaders in the world, being treated as an honored guest rather than an outsider. The Nakamura executives listened intently as she simply told her story, growing up in Queens, working multiple jobs to support her family, her dreams of opening her own restaurant someday. "Miss Rodriguez," Hiroshi Nakamura said finally, "in Japan, we have a concept called Ningen-sei, human character. It refers to the depth of a person's humanity, their capacity for compassion and moral courage. What you demonstrated 3 nights ago embodies this principle perfectly." Mrs. Tanaka nodded in agreement. "We believe that successful business partnerships are built on shared values. Your actions showed us that Mr. Hayes operates in an environment where such values still exist." As the meeting concluded with handshakes and signed agreements, Isabella realized she had just witnessed the completion of a deal that would reshape Alexander's entire company. The Nakamura executives bowed to her with genuine respect before departing, leaving her alone with Alexander in the boardroom. "So," she said, still processing everything that had happened, "I really did help save your empire." Alexander laughed, the sound filled with relief and joy. "You saved more than my empire, Isabella. You saved me." He moved closer, his expression becoming serious again. "I meant what I said earlier. I'd like to get to know you better, not as the woman who saved my life for my business, but as Isabella, the person who cares for her family, who works multiple jobs to pursue her dreams, who has the courage to act when others freeze." Isabella looked into his eyes and saw something she hadn't expected to find in a billionaire's gaze: vulnerability, sincerity, and hope. "I have to warn you," she said with a small smile. "I come with a lot of complications. Student loans, family obligations, a schedule that would make most people exhausted just looking at it. I have some complications too, Alexander replied. Diabetes that requires constant management, a business that demands travel around the world, and a social circle that might not immediately understand what I see in you. What do you see in me? Isabella asked softly. Alexander stepped closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I see someone real, someone who chose to help a stranger instead of protecting herself. Someone who accomplished more in 5 minutes than most people do in a lifetime. He paused, searching her eyes. I see someone I'd like to fall in love with, if she'll let me. Isabella felt tears welling up in her eyes. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that her life was about to change in ways she had never imagined. Alexander, You don't have to answer now, he said gently. Just promise me you'll give us a chance. Let me take you to dinner somewhere that isn't Crystal Pavilion. Somewhere we can just be two people getting to know each other. Isabella nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in her throat. 6 months later, Alexander and Isabella stood together at the grand opening of Rodriguez and Hayes Community Kitchen, a restaurant and culinary training center they had created together in Queens. The venture combined Isabella's dream of owning a restaurant with Alexander's resources and business expertise, but more importantly, it provided job training and affordable meals for the community where Isabella had grown up. The Nakamura executives attended the opening, having become not just business partners but genuine friends. They watched with approval as the couple worked side by side, serving meals to families from the neighborhood. You know, Hiroshi Nakamura said to his son Kenji, sometimes the best business decisions are the ones that follow the heart. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Alexander and Isabella found themselves alone in their restaurant, surrounded by the dream they had built together. Any regrets? Alexander asked, pulling her into his arms. Isabella smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought them from a medical emergency to this moment. Just one, she said playfully. I regret not spilling something on you that first night. It might have gotten your attention sooner. Alexander laughed and kissed her, knowing that sometimes the most important moments in life begin with someone's willingness to help a stranger in need. What had started as a medical crisis had become the foundation of an empire built not just on business success, but on love, compassion, and the simple truth that character matters more than wealth. Their story proved that sometimes, saving someone's life is just the beginning of saving each other's hearts. The months following their first dinner together had been a whirlwind of discovery for both Alexander and Isabella. She had been amazed to learn that beneath the billionaire exterior was someone who still remembered every customer from his first tech support job, who personally answered emails from employees' children, and who had quietly funded diabetes research for years without seeking recognition. Alexander, meanwhile, found himself captivated by Isabella's unwavering determination and her ability to find joy in simple moments. She had taught him to appreciate things he had forgotten, the satisfaction of cooking a meal from scratch, the warmth of community gatherings, the peace that came from helping others without expecting anything in return. Their relationship hadn't been without challenges. Alexander's world of charity galas and board meetings initially felt overwhelming to Isabella, while her tight-knit family dynamic was foreign to someone who had grown up with nannies and boarding schools. But they had navigated each obstacle together, learning to bridge their different backgrounds with patience and understanding. The turning point had come when Isabella invited Alexander to her brother Miguel's medical school graduation. Watching her beam with pride as Miguel walked across the stage, knowing that her years of sacrifice had helped make his dream possible, Alexander realized he was witnessing something more valuable than any business achievement: the pure love of family supporting each other's aspirations. That night he had proposed in the small Queens apartment where Isabella had grown up, with her mother and Miguel as witnesses. There were no elaborate setups or expensive rings, just a simple, heartfelt promise to build a life together based on the values they both cherished. The engagement had surprised many in Alexander's social circle, but the Nakamura family had sent their enthusiastic congratulations along with a traditional Japanese tea set as an engagement gift. True partnerships, Hiroshi Nakamura had written in his note, are built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Planning their wedding had become an adventure in compromise and creativity. Instead of an exclusive venue, they chose the rooftop garden of a community center in Isabella's neighborhood, transforming it into an elegant space that welcomed both billionaire executives and local families. The guest list included everyone from Fortune 500 CEOs to Isabella's former co-workers at the diner, creating an atmosphere unlike any society wedding Manhattan had ever seen. The ceremony itself had been conducted in both English and Spanish, honoring Isabella's heritage while incorporating Alexander's family traditions. When they exchanged vows, Isabella promised to continue challenging Alexander to see beyond his comfort zone, while Alexander vowed to support Isabella's dreams while learning from her strength and compassion. Their honeymoon had been spent not in an exotic resort, but traveling through small towns across America, visiting family-owned restaurants and learning about different culinary traditions. The experience had solidified their shared vision for the community kitchen they would eventually open together. The Rodriguez and Hayes Community Kitchen had become more than just a restaurant. It was a symbol of what could happen when different worlds came together with common purpose. The establishment offered 3 distinct services: a fine dining section that attracted Alexander's business associates and generated revenue, a casual family restaurant with affordable prices for neighborhood residents, and a culinary training program that provided job skills and placement assistance for people looking to change their careers. Isabella had proven to be a natural entrepreneur, combining her food service experience with business courses she completed through an accelerated program that Alexander's company sponsored. Her leadership style was different from anything Alexander had encountered in corporate boardrooms. She led with empathy and encouragement, creating a work environment where employees felt valued and motivated to excel. The success of their restaurant had caught the attention of other business leaders, leading to requests for Isabella to speak at conferences about community-centered business models. She had initially been nervous about public speaking, but Alexander had helped her prepare, and she had discovered a talent for inspiring others to consider how their businesses could serve broader purposes beyond profit. Their personal life had found a rhythm that worked for both of them. Alexander had learned to manage his diabetes more carefully, with Isabella's support and understanding. She had created a system of reminders and backup supplies that traveled with them, ensuring that his condition never again reached the crisis level of that first night they met. They had also established traditions that honored both their backgrounds. Sunday dinners were spent with Isabella's extended family in Queens, where Alexander had learned to play dominoes and had become surprisingly competitive at the family's weekly tournaments. Meanwhile, Isabella had accompanied Alexander to business functions around the world, proving to be an excellent ambassador for their company's values and community focus. The impact of their partnership extended beyond their personal relationship. The Nakamura collaboration had expanded into multiple ventures, with the Japanese executives often citing the character-based foundation of their American partnership as a model for other international business relationships. Alexander's company had adopted community service requirements for all employees, while also implementing profit-sharing programs inspired by Isabella's belief that success should benefit everyone who contributed to it. Their love story had also inspired changes in how both of them approached their individual goals. Alexander had established a foundation focused on diabetes education and emergency response training, ensuring that more people would have the knowledge Isabella had possessed that crucial night. Isabella had created scholarship programs for restaurant workers seeking to advance their careers, remembering her own struggles to balance work and education. As they stood together in their restaurant on opening night, surrounded by friends, family, and community members, both Alexander and Isabella marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as a medical emergency had evolved into a love story, a business partnership, and a community resource that would impact countless lives. The evening's success was measured not just in revenue or critical reviews, but in the smiles of neighbors enjoying affordable, high-quality meals, the pride of culinary students presenting dishes they had learned to prepare, and the satisfaction of knowing they had created something meaningful together. Later that night, as they cleaned up after the celebration, Isabella found Alexander standing quietly in the restaurant's main dining room, looking thoughtful. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, joining him by the windows that overlooked the street where she had grown up. "I'm thinking about luck," Alexander replied, wrapping his arms around her. "About how a medical emergency I thought was the worst possible timing turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me." Isabella smiled, leaning back against his chest. "Well, when you put it that way, maybe we should send a thank you note to your pancreas." Alexander laughed, the sound echoing through their restaurant. Their shared dream made real. "I love you, Isabella Rodriguez Hayes." "I love you too, Alexander." even if you did almost die before I got the chance to fall for you properly. Their reflection in the restaurant window showed two people who had found not just love, but purpose in each other's company. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to serve their community, and new adventures in building a life together. But tonight, they simply held each other, grateful for the unexpected way that love had found them both. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.